Hey, how you doing today? I'm Ron,
I'm Zach.
and we're Widetrack, and we just wanted to wish you a happy 2019. And it's been a few weeks since we did our last podcast. We've been real busy working on some new music that we're going to be releasing this month. Starting in January, we're putting out a new song every month. But more than that to come. Today, we'd like to just have a little bit of a share some thoughts with you about some music stuff. What do you think, Zach?
Absolutely, that sounds lovely. I'll let you kick things off.
Well, Zach and I have been kind of taking a new direction with our music writing, and we're basically moving on into a new thing where just the two of us are going to be writing and recording our music. And this is exciting for us. Zach's doing all the guitar and bass, and I'm doing all the drums and vocals. So, and then whatever else is involved, we will see. But more to the point, one of the things we've been talking about is we had a program on YouTube for a while called Influences, and we talked about a lot of the things that kind of go into the making of our music. But there's a certain philosophy that we've never talked about, and it's kind of something that's almost I don't know, it's a kind of cringy word to some people, unfortunately, but we wanted to kind of, maybe shed a little positive light on it, and that is the word jazz. So earlier today, Zach was kind of talking about, jazz gets bad rap, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about what jazz is.
Actually, the words that I said is everybody likes some sort of jazz, right? I mean, it's like, you ask somebody, yeah, you like jazz? And they're like, sure, yeah. And it's like maybe they imagine, jazz trio, jazz quartet. Maybe they imagine, big band, Christmas music, or whatever other upsetting forms. Or maybe they imagine something like a coffee table jazz, or maybe they imagine some sort of crazy million notes a second, total free art, avant-garde jazz, or whatever. But I feel like, at least in today's musically diverse society, many people are fans of jazz one way or another.
Are you saying they're fans of jazz, but they just don't know it?
I've met people of the sort. I mean, I just think it's one of those things where it's like, it's a very universal thing, I suppose. But this is news to me, what people don't like. This lovely genre of secrets and joyous endeavors beats me.
It's jazz has always been about more of a philosophy to my mind. I'm not saying it's only that, obviously, but I think about the essence of jazz, which is jazz has been quoted as being the last great American art form, and one of the things about it is the spirit of improvisation and playing in the moment, playing off the people around you. And it's a very uncalculated thing, oftentimes in its best element. One of the things I've always loved about the jazz philosophy is the pure potentiality of music in that realm. You basically, it's really interesting when you're writing music and you're generating ideas to write music. There's this kind of middle ground between imposing restriction and order on yourself, but also being free. And for some musicians, the restrictions are very helpful to them. There's certainly a such thing as musicians who have too much freedom, and they don't know what to do with it. And stylistically speaking, different musicians will gravitate towards one degree or the other, or a combination. For us, it's really important to be able to be free to explore and come up with the ideas, and jazz certainly has that spirit about it. It's certainly, when you watch some great or listen to some great classic Miles Davis or John Coltrane or Chick Corea, et cetera, et cetera, there's definitely you know, going into the unknown, the adventure of that. And certainly the best musicians walking the planet are, arguably anyway, jazz musicians. What are your thoughts on all that?
Oh, well, you know, it's like you take a bunch of different great bands that are, you know, rock bands or whatever you could call them. You know, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, King Crimson. You know, even you could say bands like Rush or Genesis, these earlier progressive rock bands, which we draw a lot of influence from. Though their music may not swing often or anything like that, they still do take a lot of the kind of harmony, I suppose, and building blocks of jazz, which is really cool to see. You know, I feel like there's two different kinds of jazz and rock. One of them is jazz fusion, which is its own thing, and then the other kind is like King Crimson or ELP. You know, it's still rock and roll, but it's also got this whole other dimension to it because it's got this total foreign architecture of musical textures and voicings, and it's all super cool to hear. Especially, you know, when you listen to a song, you'll always find new stuff because it's all just so compact with all sorts of little nuance, and it's very pleasant, at least for me. I don't know.
Well, yeah, one of the exciting things for me is as we move forward in Widetrack with our albums, we're beginning our fourth album, is up to this point, I've been the writer of the music, and I've tried to keep the songs very concise, you know, roughly 4 minutes, kind of formulaic, but throwing those moods and those musical elements within that framework. And now that Zach and I have been collaborating on the new Widetrack music, there's a real exciting exploration that's begun where it's like, hey man, these songs can be more adventurous and we don't have to stick to such a strict format. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of bands, you take like a lot of the aforementioned bands like Genesis or ELP or like a lot of the progressive rock bands, even Yes, they kind of started the opposite way. They started with really long songs. Rush did it, and they just eventually condensed their music to fit in a pop format. I feel like we're kind of coming at it from a more an opposite angle where it's like, let's little by little we're getting more and more comfortable taking more risks, and a lot of that is due to a deeper appreciation of jazz. And you know, the thing when I think about you know, some of the great jazz bands like fusion jazz, Mahavishnu Orchestra, or you know, as I said, Chick Corea's band, or whoever, it's the word that comes to mind is adventurous. You know, they're going on a journey, musical journeys, and they don't know where that journey is going to lead them, and that's an exciting thing. So for us, you know, maybe one day we will, in our live setting, it remains to be seen if we'll develop improvisational moments or elements to our style, but certainly while we're writing, that's informing the process of writing and recording, and that's been a pleasant surprise so far. So
I'm not gonna lie, I've been pulling a couple punches here. So there's a big, wide market, I suppose, for jazz music, and there's a whole bunch of different types. Of course, it's like rock music, you know. You've got stuff that's basically pop music with guitars, all the way to borderline white noise death metal or whatever else, you know, but it's all sort of still contained within this genre of rock if you so choose. jazz is, I believe, similar. You know, you've got some really great stuff, but you've also got the stuff that a lot of people may be familiar with and maybe, and rightfully so, not so into. For example, you ever realize every October, you know, you start hearing Christmas music, and by the time, you know, mid-November comes around, the last thing you want to hear is another big band, jazzy style Christmas song? I'm with you. All right, it's great for what it is, but you gotta know that there's more to it. And you know, there's of course artists and bands that we've mentioned and all, but even from the innovators of, you know, jazz fusion and such, you know, Jaco Pastorius and the greats and all that that come after him. I know as a bass player he's a very great inspiration and all that, but you know, all sorts of different places they've got these gems, you know, and there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and it gets maybe not even a bad rap, but I feel just a rap that's unfair nonetheless. So if I can encourage you all to do anything, it's go check out some stuff that, you know, you wouldn't have thought to check out before, you know, expand the musical tastes, I suppose. It's
you know,
it's never a bad thing.
That brings up a good point. And a couple years back, I watched the PBS Ken Burns Jazz documentary series, which we have to see that. But one of the main points that was made in that, and it, as it goes through the history of jazz, it also goes through like this whole dialogue that was going on at the and still continues, where jazz purists and jazz aficionados, jazz fans, they disagree on what jazz really is. And that's an exciting conversation, you know. It's kind of like, you know, just like, you know, well, that's not real jazz. This is real jazz. No, this is real jazz. No, this is what, you know. And as you're investigating, you know, you are free to decide that for yourself. I think that's the ultimate takeaway from all that. It becomes a little bit too strict of parameters to go by to listen to somebody who says, "Oh, that's not real jazz," or, you know, whatever. There's something about that purist mindset that can really undermine one's appreciation for what's out there.
And I think a big part of us trying to keep that in mind when we're, you know, consuming and producing different forms of media and art is, you know, we try and avoid the purist mindset as much as possible, but kind of think about it in a way that's like, you know, what do we do not to just avoid that, but to also prevent that, you know? And I think that sort of mindset has led us to where we are now with so many different influences coming in. I mean, we've got like, what, 50 or so episodes of influences, and there's so many more to count that it would be weird to make an episode on each of them. I know personally I've got like 10 I can name off the top of my head, but I'll save that for another time. But all this is only possible because of putting away the, though comfortable, very destructive purist mindset.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, my philosophy has so long been, I don't have a religion in terms of what this is the best thing and this is the only path. And, you know, to quote one of my favorite authors, Khalil Gibran, he says, "Don't say I found the truth, say I found a truth." And I think music really does really offer a lot if you can just unashamedly take what you like. And jazz is fearless in that regard. And I think that's a lot of these jazz artists are laughing behind the backs of all of these, you know, armchair quarterbacks. They're basically saying, you know, I'm going to make music, dude, and I love jazz. So you can call it not real jazz all you want, but there's people that it very much impacts, and more importantly, this is my true musical love. So that's inspirational. That really, it's whether we're rock and we're not really a jazz band, but we love taking the elements of something pure like that and learning from it, trying to apply it where it works. So jazz works out pretty good in that regard for us. Even if you can't really hear it in our sound, maybe it'll come across in the spirit of things. So anyhow, we would welcome you guys to comment on
Yeah, what's
this.
your favorite jazz music? Or, you know
Yeah.
what? Question number 2, what's your favorite music that isn't jazz music, but, would kind of surprise you the same way, or something like that, I always find it interesting to think about the musical tastes I have and say to myself, wow, I never really thought of myself as much of a such and such fan, but yeah, I mean, that's what I'm into. Yeah, so what are those things like for you? Let us know.
Absolutely. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please feel free to do so. We're going to be doing more regular updates here and keeping this podcast rolling. And
Can you make sure we let you in on the new album, the monthly songs and such and such?
Yes, we got a new song coming out with the video coming out. What do you think, next week?
It's reasonable.
With-
Say sometime next week.
Ish. So, but one a month until the end of the year, and then we'll be putting out the album as a whole, and all along the way we'll be giving you guys little surprises to get you into it. So, all right.
Well, without further ado,
Keep on rocking.